That was Bike
From
Talk.
KPFK in Los Angeles, California, Valley Free Radio in Florence, and WMBR in Cambridge, Massachusetts, WNUC in Detroit, and BikeTalk.org worldwide. This is Bike Talk.
Hey, it's Charlie here, not with a week's news, but instead I'm here to bring you the best of 2025. We at Bike Talk have reflected upon the rather interesting year it's been, and we're here to serve you some highlights. So first up is an interview with Lucy Maloney from episode 2533. We hope you enjoy.
We often talk about moving advocates from just being advocates into politics, and I can't think of a better example than Lucy Maloney, who has been on the show a few times talking about Vancouver, Canada, and Stanley Park and bike lanes and things like that. And she was a stay-at-home mom, so to speak, raising two teenage boys biking and skiing. And she decided that the City Council of Vancouver was not moving fast enough in creating safe streets and environments for people to choose options to get around outside of an automobile. And she ran for city council and she won, and she's back on the show. Lucy, welcome back to Bike Talk.
Thank you. It's really lovely to talk to you, and in real life this time.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm up in Vancouver working, and we connected, and she said, come over and borrow one of my bikes rather than a city bike. But let's get back to you running for council. What made you run for council? How was the campaign? And how do you look forward to changing the city even more? Because the city is, I think, doing quite well from what I've seen just in the few days that I've been here. So I know that's a lot of questions, but what got you to run? And let's go from there.
Yeah, well, I was approached to run by a political party called One City Vancouver, and the previous One City councillor was elected to the provincial government. So they needed someone to run to make sure that they had someone in the by-election so that they were well set up to hopefully win more seats in the general municipal election that's coming up next year. So I had never considered being a politician, and I'd always said no because people had suggested, why don't you run for park board or school board due to my previous community involvement and volunteering. And I think I was probably an attractive candidate because I've worked in business and government. I've done heaps of community work. I'm a parent. I've got a pretty good CV for running for council. Yeah. And I wasn't really tempted, but it ended up being a really good thing to do, because when I can just send an email to the head of engineering and the director of transport and ask for a meeting and they have to answer, or I get 15 minutes in council to ask questions during the transport update, it's the best thing in the world. You know, I don't have to ask anyone. I don't have to advocate to one of the existing councillors to ask them to please move this amendment or please move this motion and convince them. I can just have a little talk to myself, say, I think we should move an amendment to this motion, and I just do. So it's pretty efficient.
Yeah. Well, tell me how the campaign was, because this is not a neighborhood council. This is a big deal. There's only 11 seats on the Vancouver City Council. So you must have had to raise a fair amount of money and really play the game of, running in politics.
Yeah, and I never would have run if it hadn't have been for the political party that I ran with, because they've got two essential elements that convinced me that it was worthwhile running. The first is that I didn't have to bend my values or my priorities at all. One City is the political party that aligns most closely with my values and priorities. And I knew that from Christine Boyle's voting record. She was always the councillor easiest to work with because she already agreed with us and was enthusiastic about all the things that I wanted to get done. But also they're very good organisers. So they've got the resources and the great big volunteer base to really get out into the community and get our message across so that we had a good chance of me being elected.
Well, in the past, when you've been on Bike Talk, you've talked about the pushback that the city council gave toward changing the bike lane structure of Stanley Park. And for listeners who don't know, Stanley Park is a peninsula at the end of Vancouver that is absolutely gorgeous. And there's no reason that cars should be roaming free in there anyways. But you had talked about how they were going to take the bike lanes out and things like that. And you even said that your opponents, when you were running for office, sort of labeled you the bike lane lady. And we always worry about that. Laura Friedman, who's a U.S. congressperson in California, had the same issue. You know, her opponent labeled her the bike lane lady, and she won. So was being labeled the bike lane lady in Vancouver positive or a negative? And how do you see changing Stanley Park now that you're on the board?
Well, I think it ended up being a positive because there was a progressive backlash against the conservative. Right. They don't think of themselves as conservative, but they are the majority on council. So I was elected in a by-election, and we've only got another...
Which means like a midterm election?
Yeah,
is that what that is?
Exactly, because there were 2 resignations. So me and another progressive, we were elected in the by-election as a backlash to the decisions that have been made by this council. Great. They're 3 years into their mandate now, but I feel like they're deeply unpopular. Some of my political enemies, you know, tried to label me as the bike lady, but I've also done lots of general road safety advocacy. So we did focus on that, but towards the election day, we really did lean into my popularity amongst active transport users, and I was canvassing main streeting on, they call it main streeting, on bike routes. So towards the pre-voting days, we were stationing ourselves along 10th Avenue, which is the most used commuter bike lane in the city probably, and on other bike routes where lots of cyclists were there, and I had my little pitch. I say, do you care about road safety and do you want more bike lanes? Well, then vote for me. It was a very quick thing to say, and I think we really engaged a lot of people. So, well,
that's what people don't seem to understand is bike lanes make the road safer for everybody, even for drivers.
Yeah, and also I think that when you've got a setup like you do in Vancouver where most of the bike routes are not on the main roads, people who drive for transport can sometimes majorly underestimate how many people are getting around by bike. You know, I was sitting in my car, because I do drive as well, waiting for my daughter to finish her volleyball practice last night, and I was on a bike route and it was raining like you wouldn't believe, and there were hardly any cars going down that street because it's a traffic calm street, but cyclist after cyclist after cyclist in their wet weather gear, just getting around same as usual.
Well, speaking of wet weather gear, I'm up here working and today's my day off and it's pouring rain, and Lucy's going to lend me not only a bicycle but some wet weather gear, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yep, we've got plenty of Gore-Tex hanging around, and you know, it's not even that cold, so I figure I've got my whole rain outfit that I have ready to put on, so I think we're going to have a great time and see a new bike route that was voted for by the previous council and has just opened up, and I did get a bit of heat from the majority council for criticising them for... I made sure that people knew that it wasn't this council that voted for this. They're standing up in front of the cameras saying this is a great thing and taking credit for it. But really all they did was not pull funding for it. And they've made the terrible decisions not to rip out the bike lanes in Stanley Park and to not put bike lanes on the 8-kilometre street rebuild of the Broadway underground rail project that's going in at the moment. So they voted against those 2 very major important bike routes. So the next council, after these people get voted out, hopefully at the end of next year, are not going to be able to stand up and
take credit for
anything that's going to happen because we've stopped the pipeline. So you're right, we're very blessed in the city of Vancouver by the cycling infrastructure that's been voted in against serious backlash sometimes. over previous years, but we have to keep being politically courageous. We have to keep pushing it. And we need to make sure that we're continuing to invest in extending the bike network and ungapping the map, as one of our cycling advocacy organisations keeps saying.
Well, what's the makeup of the council now in favour of bike lanes and sort of anti-bike lanes?
Well, you know, the majority on council say that they're in favour of bike lanes until it comes to
taking away parking,
Well, no, until it comes to any major. I mean, it's not just taking away. I guess it's taking away any movement and storage of cars. Right. They can't be relied on to make the politically courageous decisions. Right. It's fine to do it when you've got nothing to lose, but if they're always going to cave into opposition voices, then we've got to just get them voted out. And you know, they have made some good decisions to explore dedicated bus lanes, to explore leading pedestrian interval traffic lights. So they tinker around the edges, and they're very proud of that, and they want lots of credit for that. I'm happy to give them credit for the good things that they do. Right. But the soul-crushing missed opportunity of remaking a street, 8 kilometres of a commercial street that's been designated for huge population growth in our city, that is the most terribly short-sighted decision you could possibly have made. And I think it's the worst decision on active transport that they've made, even worse than Stanley Park. Wow.
How long will you be a council person, and will you run again? I mean, are you on a split term because you came in halfway through, or are there term limits? What's your goal? Are you going to run for premier of British Columbia next, or?
No, I'm very much limiting myself to Vancouver City Council. Municipal politics is really important. You know, if I wanted to concentrate on federal issues or provincial issues, I'd do that. But what I want to do is affect change in my local community. Right. And I think that I'm well set up to do that. And I promised my political party when I agreed to run in the by-election that I would also run in the general municipal election next year. So I'm definitely going to do that. Right. But I'm also trying to build up the party and pave the way for a really good, diverse group of progressive candidates to get on the park board, the school board and council, and hopefully support a really strong mayoral candidate so that we can really make progressive change, and that we've got the numbers to be in power, because I'm not interested in just staying an opposition councillor. I want to set us up so that we can govern and do good things to help protect the environment, improve the lives of the most vulnerable people in the city, and make the city vibrant and fun and interesting and supportive for everybody that lives here and the people that want to live here. Right.
Well, to me, that's the lesson. If you're an advocate, get involved in local politics. As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. And I'm really enjoying being in Vancouver now. It's changed a lot since the last time I was here. And I look forward to coming back again and having it be even more bike-friendly. Lucy, thanks a lot for running, and thanks for being on Bike Talk again.
Thank you so much.
Once again, that was Lucy Maloney in episode 2533. Next up, we've got Miser and Zohran in episode 2525. And this one's pretty satisfying to listen to in retrospect. Here it is.
Can you tell us what's at stake in the mayoral election in New York City?
There's enormous stakes. And, I should say we're recording this on Monday night, which is before the election. So unlike your audience, I don't know who wins. It's kind of crazy because the stakes couldn't be more different for the two leading candidates. We have Andrew Cuomo, who represents very much the old guard style of Democratic politics. You know, you think you're Hillary Clinton or, I don't know, Kerry or something like that. And then you've got a very young, very active cyclist who knows all our issues and has been working with us forever. running against him. So if Cuomo wins this race, it's going to be dire for biking in New York, and pretty dire, I think, generally for a lot of issues. Whereas Zohran could be quite literally a world figure in this, like someone like Anne Hidalgo, who's known around the world for urbanist ideals and understanding of these issues.
Sure, the mayor of Paris, right?
Yeah, who, if you follow bike issues in urbanist news, transformed the city of Paris pretty much in record time. And you really need somebody like that leading your major cities. Otherwise, things just tend to get bogged down. We've had a string now of just kind of ho-hum mayors that don't really get much done, or mayors like our current one, Eric Adams, who are, as we've talked about, sort of against the project of micromobility and cycling in the city. But Zohran himself rides bikes. I mean, he has literally thousands of miles on his public bike share account. And he's been coming to meetings that I've been holding about this stuff for ages. He was one of the first proponents of our daylighting campaign, which has been phenomenally successful in getting daylighting bills in all of the city and state legislative chambers.
Can you explain daylighting real quick?
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, daylighting is basically the process of making intersections so that everybody can see everybody else, which, if you're lucky to live enough in most of this country, you are already sort of familiar with. But New York City, as a way of maximizing parking spaces a few decades ago, got rid of or overruled our state laws against daylighting and has been letting drivers park right up against the crosswalk, which is a huge problem for visibility, especially if you're a kid, because, some of these trucks have hood heights that are 6 feet tall and kids simply can't see over them. And it leads to a lot of children, especially, getting run over. So we brought a campaign that has been phenomenally successful in a very short amount of time in raising awareness. And now it's just generally known even among people that don't care about cycling or street safety issues. And it's looking like it's going to pass bills probably in multiple legislative chambers. So Zohran was one of the first politicians to really sign on for that. He's not like one of these politicians that just kind of signs on later. He truly fights for what he believes in, and he knows the actual nuts and bolts policy of what it takes to make this stuff work. So really, really hoping he wins this election, quite frankly.
I saw in one of the events, your Ask Me Anything events, that you held with Zohran. Some of his ideas were to have universal school streets where the streets in front of every school are closed to cars. Slowing speeds throughout the city using Sammy's Law, which we've talked about. Implement the master plan for streets. Get automated bus lane enforcement. Do weekly open streets, car-free pedestrian events. He's got a lot of ideas, and that's just.
Those things would change the city. It would make it a quiet, cleaner, more pleasant place to live and work.
100%. Yeah, no, he's the real deal. I mean, he's been a strong proponent about all of these things. I mean, we get a lot of people that sort of talk about these issues in a sort of vague, high-minded way to try to appeal to our demographics, because remember, in New York City, we actually have a ton of people that bike. I mean, it's something like over 1 million people ride a bike regularly here out of, the 8 million in the city. So it's a pretty huge demographic, and every politician sort of panders to us a little bit. But Zohran actually knows the actual issues and how to actually make it happen, And
in New York, everybody walks.
Yeah. No, every single person's a pedestrian at some point in their day. Even drivers. So there's obviously great reason to do these things. Unfortunately, drivers also have a really large amount of power relative to their actual size in the population, because obviously the rich people all drive and almost all of the politicians drive. So the people that ride the bus, the people that bike, the people that ride the subway, which is the vast majority of people, have a very small amount of power relative to how much we should have. And honestly, that kind of ties into Zohran's pitch on a lot of issues, is that he's representing, in a lot of ways, the people. His campaign has collected a huge amount of small donations. He's knocking on it. People are volunteering and knocking on something like 1 million doors for him. Whereas his opponent basically didn't even campaign and has just gotten a few amounts of huge donations from billionaires. It's very much a David and Goliath fight, and
Right.
the bike issues tie into that as well.
Plus, everybody just knows, Cuomo's name. They know his father and all that.
I mean, in a terrible way, too.
Yeah.
Miser, let me ask you, how is ranked voting going to help or hurt Mamdani?
Yeah, it's a great question, because ranked choice voting is the way that we do elections here, and it's a godsend. If your municipality doesn't have ranked choice voting, you need to get them to do it as fast as possible, because it fixes a lot of problems that we have in other places with elections, right? The main one being that when you have what's called first past the poll, which is just the winner takes all voting, which is what most elections in this country are, it encourages people that are running in a primary, like let's say you have two Democrats running and two Republicans running against each other in a primary, it encourages their supporters to fight each other. So like the closer they are ideologically aligned, the more they fight each other, because they're fighting for the same spot among the same people a lot of the time. So you see this with, like, say, I don't know, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who are incredibly similar ideologically, or close enough, right? And they're at each other's throat in an election, and their supporters are, more importantly, at each other's throat, because they're competing against each other. Whereas ranked choice voting is you can rank multiple people, and if your preferred candidate, the one you want, doesn't win, your second choice gets your vote. So what we've seen here happen is the two candidates that I've endorsed in the race, Zohran and Brad Lander, and a lot of us have sort of been putting our hopes on in the bike world, have formed an alliance in the waning days, and it's really great to see, because they're working together and making the case like, hey, vote for me first, but vote for this other guy second. So if I don't win, they get your vote, right? And they're doing this like sort of charm offensive that's just, it's just beautiful to watch, because they would have been at each other's throat in any other system, right? But instead, we've kept a coalition together, which is the people that are ideologically similar on these issues, which is what politics should be. These politics should be a big tent and coalitions forming that aren't maybe exactly aligned, but are working together to push in the same, general direction. So that's one big problem. I'm sorry, this is a very long-winded answer, but that is definitely one of the problems to fixes. The other is that you just get better candidates, because someone like Zohran wouldn't be running at all in a system where they had to run boring candidates.
And you did an interview with Zohran. You caught him was it the Queensboro Bridge, or where'd you meet him?
Yeah, that's correct. Right on the South Outer Roadway, which was another giant fight we had recently about opening a pedestrian lane on the Queensboro Bridge.
Great, let's hear that.
In Astoria, I have often been pushing the DOT to be more ambitious with their planning, because what's also happened is that too often, we've allowed years and years of DOT reps having to present to community boards that are innately hostile to their vision of creating a street that is safe for all those who use it, to then mean that we are constraining the vision that we have for the interventions that could be taking place, whether it be bike lanes or whether it be daylighting. What we need to do is not think about the potential backlash, but to think about the cost simply in human life that we are looking at if we continue on this path of inaction. And that needs to be the driving force. And I think what you need to make that a reality is somebody who is leading the city with that explicit directive down to the DOT, that this is how we are going to make decisions, and this is what we are going to be considering as the ultimate factor in whether or not we do something. Is this going to save anyone's life?
Yeah, well, I hope we get that leader you're talking about.
As we say, inshallah.
And that's very inspiring.
Well, Miser, thanks very much for speaking rationally at public meetings and all the work you do. How do people find you online?
I have a subreddit called Micromobility NYC. That's probably the best way.
And thanks for coming on Bike Talk.
Oh, thank you.
That was Miser with a little feature from Zohran Mamdani in episode 2525. Next up, we've got Anjoleah Daye from episode 2505 with Black Girls Do Bike.
cycling, riding a bike, being a human being who's on a bicycle has had a rap, rightly so or not, of being kind of a white man's club for a long time. But that's changing, thank goodness. And it's changing because of groups like the guest that I have today. Anjoleah Daye is a member, I believe, but we'll get more into it, of Black Women Do Bike. Anjoleah, welcome to Bike Talk.
Thank you for having me. Black Girls Do Bike. It is a national organization founded by Monica Garrison. And if I recall, the first sort of origin stories were on the East Coast. Now they have chapters in every major city. And I first got involved in the early years when I lived in New York, and I was part of Black Girls Do Bike Brooklyn.
Right.
And then when I moved to the West Coast in 2016, I was living in Seattle, Washington. And while Seattle is known to be a bicycle-friendly city, I've been in transportation planning for 17 years and more importantly, transportation, or rather, bicycling and pedestrian advocacy. And the spaces have been historically white male. And when I go to Seattle for the first time, I didn't see, lots of people that look like me on a bike. And so I tapped into that chapter there. I moved to Oakland in 2020. I wanted to hold space. And so I reached out to the founder, Monica, and I asked, who's the current leadership? And, if they are still interested and need maybe perhaps some assistance, I would like to, join the fold and whatever that looks like. But if not, I would like to take over as chapter leader, or what is called as a shiro. And
is that she hero? Is that what that is?
Correct. Correct.
I love that.
Me too. I mean, the Bay Area is interesting in terms of geography, right? Because it covers a large area. And so, but at the time, we're about 800 members strong.
Oh my goodness, that's big, yeah.
And since my leadership, at the very least, we are now, we hit the 1,000 mark.
Oh, wow, congratulations.
So, thank you.
So is that the Oakland chapter, or is that the Los Angeles chapter where you are now?
Currently, I am in Los Angeles. So that was previously, that was the Bay Area.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, why is it important to have an organization that, I don't want to say solely supports, but that really does support and encourage women of color?
Well, I think that, women, especially women of color, we bring essential perspectives, representation, and even leadership to the cycling space, helping to shape sort of a more inclusive and equitable biking culture. And I think, if I could talk a little bit about representation and visibility, a lived experience in the Pacific Northwest, including Portland, where I did a brief stint, seeing women, particularly women of color, and just speaking, solely from a Black woman's perspective, that's even very different. I don't know what it's like to be, a Vietnamese woman or a Puerto Rican woman, and so women of color on bikes challenges the stereotype and sort of expands this perception of who's cycling and who is cycling for.
Right.
And so I think it encourages women to ride, sort of showing that it isn't limited to a specific gender or a specific race or a specific sort of socioeconomic background. I think some pockets of the world, cycling, similar to who rides the bus, a sort of a weird, well, poor people ride bikes because, if you didn't, if you weren't, you wouldn't have
walking, right?
Right. Yeah. And so, and also I think representation and leadership and advocacy and business. And I'll expand on that as a new business owner myself. It ensures that the needs of diverse voices, diverse riders are met, especially when we start talking about from a safety and infrastructure to affordability lens.
Right. Well, one of the videos that I saw, because I spent some time on your website watching videos and looking at everything, and it says that you, as an organization, work very hard to accept all bodies on bikes and all bodies on all kinds of bikes. So it's not just racing bikes or $10,000 bikes or even $1,000 bikes. It's whatever kind of bike you got, whatever kind of body you have, get on a bike and enjoy the freedom that bikes offer.
Yes, yes. I love that because I often say that, the bicycle is a metaphor for liberation.
Right.
And so, but absolutely, and every chapter is unique, but I remember having a very clear, I won't say vision because even sometimes, I have a clear vision and there's no room to pivot. But I know that what I saw on the website was nowhere near the type of cyclist I am.
Right.
I don't own anything spandex. I don't do the
Right.
cake, because I have a UK cycling experience. And so, most of the time, similar in Canada, I'm a bike commuter.
Right.
I'm not no shade, but I'm not a weekend warrior. And so I
Right.
bike in whatever's most comfortable to me. And I remember one of the earlier rides in the Bay Area, included older women who was excited for sort of rejuvenation in the space, and particularly with this chapter. And a couple of women were, seniors. One woman said she was really active in her youth, and then now is an adult and coming to grapple with the fact that she has arthritis. But
Right.
still, and then there's a veteran. I too am a veteran, so it's in who was injured and now is slowly getting back to that and seeing what her body is capable of doing. And so, and even women who they don't have perhaps any sort of physical ailment, if you will, but they just the ease of the joints that e-bikes
Right.
bring.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes we get in these spaces where it's I mean, I am a traditionalist. I have a fixie.
Yeah.
But I
And you're
also,
wearing a biking cap now, which I really love.
thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. I'm gonna actually head out and hang out at a bike shop.
Oh, good.
My go-to bike shop is a Ride On Bike Shop in Lemert.
Sure. I know
Really good
that one.
friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good friend owns that, a Daye Neff. It just feels like that type of shop where I can go play and tinker, and it just feels like that type of space.
Well, more and more bike shops are offering coffee or even sometimes beer, which I really love. And it makes it sort of a community hub where you can kind of hang out and, maybe lube your chain or, pump up your tires or adjust your gears or whatever, but also enjoy the camaraderie that you get on the bike.
Indeed, indeed. I miss those spaces. Oakland was very good for that. They were,
Hmm.
bicycle cafes have, dual purpose, coffee, tea, beer, and of course a shop in the back. And
Right.
so I like those sort of the merger of spaces that are inherently social.
Right.
And so now we add a little bit of utility to it.
Right.
There's
Right.
you get your bike fixed or your chain lubed or whatever the case may, even a tune-up while you
Right.
just front and have a pint. So
Well, if Black Girls Do Bike was a movie, the log line would be fellowship, fitness, and freedom. And I think that's great that those three things,
yeah,
fellowship, fitness,
and I
because
love
that's
that.
partly why I enjoy riding. It makes me just feel good physically.
Right. And I love that order. And I love not, speaking broadly for a particular community, but in my lived experience and what I've observed, I think that when Black women particularly use the term fellowship, there's something spiritual about that, not particularly religious. I mean, there's
Sure.
connections too, but we are really in fellowship one another. We are holding space for one another, and whatever the ways that looks like, even that space could be a healing space. And then, but I feel like when we are just sort of in a circle, just on our bikes with our bikes, this is sort of almost like a visual testimony of triumph of all sorts of things that's unique to the Black experience. So I often say, yeah, we're holding fellowship. I think that's important given
Right.
what's just happening in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a human condition.
Right. Well, there are all kinds of rides, that start up at different places around different towns, sober rides and religious rides and hardcore, pedal to the metal rides and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about how people might find a Black Girls Do Bike chapter in Los Angeles, where we are, or in the Bay Area, or anywhere where they might be listening to the show and want to reach out and find that kind of community?
Yeah. Well, every chapter, to my understanding, at the very least, has a Facebook page. And they may, don't quote me, have a Instagram,
Right.
but the catch-all is Facebook.
Let me also ask you, do you find that other people sort of follow your path, or maybe it wasn't exactly your path, but kind of getting involved in a Black Girls Do Bike chapter and then riding a little bit more and then maybe upgrading in their biking experience and then branching out and getting involved in things like Bike East Bay or Bike LA or any other sort of advocate organization? Because as Black Girls Do Bike is a segment of the population, we also all need to come together to make our streets safer for all of us. And that means black, brown, white, whatever the color, whatever the gender of the person who's riding the bike might be.
Absolutely. So, that there's sort of a duality to my response. So on the one hand, I think that chapter leaders, that there's a level of autonomy, how they, right, even how they allow those to enter their Facebook space. For me, I wanted to finally be in a space that was going to center and not really water down that experience. So for me, I do not allow men to be in the Black Girls Do Bike Facebook group.
Oh, okay.
Because
do you allow them on the rides ever or not?
I allow a collaborative ride. So we had a collaborative ride, and I don't make that decision unilaterally. I remember having a poll, and I leave it up to the women because
sure.
If you're in this group, you're in it for whatever your reasons, but maybe that's safety. Maybe that is,
sure.
In a world of, cars, aggression. I'd like to hold space, and you can either, meet up with us afterwards, for a little, mixer at the lake if you don't feel comfortable with participating in the ride.
Right. I would like us to be in a world where critical mass isn't necessary on the last Friday of every month because we have safe streets. I'd like us to be in a world where a Black Girls Do Bike chapter is a choice and not a necessity. And I think right now it is a necessity because we need to foster different groups of people getting involved in this amazing activity that is both a sport and a transportation mode. Anjoleah Daye, it's been really wonderful to meet you and to hear about Black Girls Do Bike.
Absolutely.
That was Anjoleah Daye from episode 2505. And next up, we've got Sophia Lebowitz from episode 2543 and Streets Blog NYC on NYC e-bike classifications.
Hi, Sophia.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I feel torn because I want people to feel good about e-bikes because we know that e-bikes replace car trips. And we want people to use whatever they're going to use, and it expands people's range. There's all this bike-lash in New York City, though, because of all these things that aren't really e-bikes.
A lot of people are feeling that way. People that, advocate for less car use and more micromobility use. But in somewhere like New York City, we're seeing a lot of, like you said, bike-lash to e-bikes in general. And a lot of what we're seeing is attributing things that happen with these devices that aren't actually legal to the legal e-bikes that, people want to see used more. So I wrote this piece so that to kind of set the record straight a little bit, there are e-bikes and there are these illegal vehicles and they're different. And they look like e-bikes and they're marketed as e-bikes. One of the lawyers I spoke to for the story said e-bike isn't actually a term defined in the law. So in New York state law, an e-bike is actually called a powered bicycle. And I'm sure it's similar in other states, but basically the term e-bike is sort of colloquial. You can use it to describe anything. It's not a legal term. So you can say that you're selling what's really an illegal device and you can call it an e-bike online and sell it. And that's not mislabeling it.
Well, what do you call them then?
They're technically called motorized scooters in the law. There is a classification for them. It's basically anything with two wheels that you can sit on that's motorized, but that basically isn't an e-bike and isn't a moped. In New York City, we have 3 classes of e-bikes and they can't exceed 25 miles per hour. Most of the times these motorized scooters, which are often marketed online as e-bikes, can go up to 50 miles per hour. They're much faster and they're not regulated because they're not a part of the 3-class system. So a lot of times users can use an app to kind of change the speed threshold of the bike after market as well. They're motorized scooters. Technically, they're not e-bikes, but they look like e-bikes and they're marketed as e-bikes, and they get wrapped into the whole e-bike backlash that we're seeing in New York City.
You know, you want to say that it's just irrational fear of new technology, but it's actually pretty rational if these things are going 50 miles an hour or 40.
You know, mopeds also can go faster, but they are licensed and they're registered with the DMV, and they travel, or they're supposed to travel in the road with cars. Whereas these, you know, people buy them and think of it as an e-bike. They take them on bike paths. Like I highlight in my article, you know, the YouTuber Casey Neistat posted a video of himself riding one of these things in the Brooklyn Bridge bike path. And if you've ever ridden in New York City, you'll know that bike path is like extremely narrow. And to have someone going 37 miles per hour in the Brooklyn Bridge bike path would make anyone just sort of shudder. It's extremely scary. So people ride them as bikes in the bike infrastructure and closer to pedestrians, but they're not bikes. I mean, legally they're not.
And so this is ruining it for everybody.
I guess you could say that. I think what's more happening, at least now in New York, is that there's just a lot of confusion around the different classifications of bikes, and we have a pretty confusing system. I'm hoping that this article can help at least simplify this part for people and just explain, like, these things are already not legal. And where we have a lot of politicians kind of proposing new laws and new ways to regulate e-bikes, I think it's important to point out the regulations that we already have in place that just maybe need to be tweaked or enforced better, instead of like having these new laws that are more punitive.
You say in your article that enforcement is not the solution to this, because for one thing, the police can't tell the difference between e-bikes and these other.
Yeah, we see often that the police and the administration here in New York City don't really know the difference, one, between just an e-bike and a moped, and then definitely not between all the different types of e-bikes. And it'd be pretty hard to tell just by looking if an e-bike is legal or one of these illegal motorized scooters, because a lot of them do have this sort of motorcycle style, and you could sort of tell, but then there are other perfectly legal e-bikes that have this style as well. So it's sort of hard to know. Some people want more point of sale regulation, but it's hard because these are technically already regulated at the point of sale because they're not legal to sell. But the problem is people are able to buy them online really easily. And there's no evidence that the city is really doing anything to stop the online sale of these bikes. They do give violations and confiscate bikes at like retail stores, but they didn't give me any evidence that they were doing anything for the online sale.
And another thing you say in your article is that in New York City, Class 3 e-bikes, what would be classified Class 3 e-bikes in other parts of the country, actually are not legal in the city, right? Because they're...
Yeah, it's sort of a two-part issue. There's these illegal motorized scooters that are really out of the realm of legality, right? They go super fast. They're not Class 1, Class 2, or Class 3. They have like different modes you can switch in and out of. But then New York City's definition of a Class 3 e-bike is that it can go 25 miles per hour with the use of a throttle. And like the federal definition of a Class 3 e-bike is a bike that can go 28 miles per hour with the use of pedal assist. So it's slightly different. That can actually cause trouble for people who are trying to purchase a bike legally. That's like within New York City's regulations. You could order a bike online from a big name brand company like Trek, where, you know, you can buy a Class 3 bike that goes up to 28 miles per hour. Let's say you get into a crash and you get hit by an uninsured driver, or the driver flees the scene. If the bike goes over 25 miles per hour, then it's technically not legal in the city, and you won't be entitled to the no-fault insurance program that we have here, which helps give money to victims of crashes where the driver is uninsured or flees the scene. So it kind of puts you in a less safe position. And I don't think a lot of people know that when they buy a bike like that from a reputable brand. So there is a law, a proposed bill from Councilmember Crystal Hudson, a Brooklyn council member. You know, she wants to just get rid of Class 3 in New York City, you know, and a lot of people are saying that that would just make things simpler. And that would be essentially limiting all the e-bikes in the city to 20 miles per hour.
I mean, I have a Class 3 e-bike. If I didn't talk to you and read this article, I would have thought I could ride it in New York City. It doesn't feel that fast.
Right. I mean, odds are you could ride it, you wouldn't get stopped or anything, but it's just like one of the lawyers I spoke to was saying he's seen situations where he has a client that didn't know that they had one of these bikes that weren't legal. Technically, you can get screwed if you get into a crash with somebody that doesn't have insurance or something like that. The bill would be a point of sale bill. It would not make it illegal to ride a New York City class 3 e-bike. It would just be to sell it. So all of the people that already have them in the city, like most delivery workers have a class 3 bike. If they own their own bike, they wouldn't be penalized for using a bike they already have. It just would be that you can't buy a new one.
Then, but would that solve the problem of all these other?
No, no, because the bikes that I've most.
You can hear that full interview with Sophia Lebowitz in episode 2543, but right now we've got a little snippet from episode 2534 and Jonathan Hale.
So I found this group called the Crosswalk Collective LA, CCLA. They have been going out and painting unsanctioned crosswalks around LA for a few years now, and they have a guide for how to do this on their website. And they take requests for intersections. They're mostly active in Hollywood, Koreatown, Mid-City. Anyways, I reached out to them.
Do they have criteria for where a crosswalk needs to be made?
Yeah, I mean, they have a form where anybody can request a crosswalk at a particular intersection. Most of the crosswalks that we paint are in residential neighborhoods because you do have to block off the street to paint the crosswalk and to wait for it to dry. They're generally one-lane roads, the intersection of two roads where there's a stop sign. Because when two roads intersect and there's a stop sign, there's a crosswalk there regardless of whether there's paint on the ground, in that the pedestrians have the same legal rights and the cars legally have to yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk, even if it's not painted. Mm-hmm. So based on that, we paint crosswalks where crosswalks already exist. They're just not marked, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So do you, like you said, Richard Ankrum came out looking like a Caltrans worker. Do you dress a certain way?
Yeah. We did this, in the middle of the day, wearing safety vests and stuff. I mean, that's not to deceive anybody, I guess. When people ask what we're doing, we're very honest about it. I think that's important. It's more for safety.
Yeah.
We're not going out in the middle of the night or anything. This is like the middle of the day. If people ask about it, we say, hey, we are painting unsanctioned crosswalks in the middle of the street to make the street safer.
Okay. So did Crosswalks Collective as a group do the Stoner Park crosswalk?
So the deal was I reached out to them and I was like, hey, I want to learn how you guys do this and organize something of my own. So I went out with them. We painted a crosswalk out in Hollywood, and they set me up, put me on game.
You said put me on
game, just like they, they showed me how to do it. They showed me the ropes.
Okay.
Like the sort of paint to use, how to organize, how to manage traffic, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, I put together a group to go out to this park in West LA, Stoner Park and Sawtelle, which is a great park, by the way. I love hanging out at Stoner Park. It's a fantastic community third space. It's a place where people can hang out that's not work or home. I love going to the park and hanging out with my neighbors there. But the reason that we did it separately, I guess, was the Crosswalk Collective, they're a bit more anonymous, I guess. And the city was going around and basically removing the crosswalks that the Crosswalk Collective painted. It was like this game of whack-a-mole that took place over the course of a couple of years. Uh-huh. Like the first crosswalk that I painted out in Hollywood, that one's been removed. And so what I wanted to do with the Stoner Park crosswalks was we had a good reason to paint the crosswalks there, which was that this is a popular park. This is where summer camp is at. There's a lot of people and especially kids that come to the park for summer camp. There's a lot of schools nearby. Like there should be painted crosswalks by this park. It should be the default. And we painted them knowing that the city was going to remove them, just like they were working to remove the other crosswalks that the Crosswalk Collective had painted. But we decided that we were going to go public with this to shine some light on how ridiculous this whole thing was. Mm. So that was part of the plan. And it was a bit of a risk because it's like me, like this is my name and stuff. And I was nervous about having to speak on this and defend it.
Seems like the type of thing you could get a fine for.
Yeah, the original Crosswalk Collective has been fined. LADOT called the police on them at one point, and they got fined $250 each. With I think the second time they were warned that it would be $1,000 each, which I believe is a felony. I want to say a felony is like more than $400 in damages. Don't quote me. So it was a risk, and we knew that, but the gamble was that people would empathize with the reasons for us wanting to protest for safer streets and the means that we did to do it. And that's civil disobedience, right? If there's a law that you want to protest and you think it's dumb, then you break the law and you live with the consequences to show that the consequences are dumb and the law should be changed. But at the same time, it is scary, I guess, having to acknowledge that there's consequences.
Mm-hmm. So you did this without being anonymous.
Yeah, that was the point. I suppose we could have been anonymous. We could have covered our faces and whatnot, and the city probably would have removed them, and it would have been no big deal. And that would have been that. But that was part of the game plan. We wanted to use our voice, I guess, to speak up about this. So when the city removed the crosswalks, we were ready to have a statement and say, like, hey, we should have crosswalks there. The city needs to put the crosswalks back. And here's what we did and why we did it. And this is an act of tactical urbanism, but it's also a protest. And, we want to own up to our actions.
Wow.
The other thing that I want to emphasize, I guess, is that the Crosswalk Collective, they're just a group of friends, basically. We're all pretty cordial with each other. Like, we're just like a group of friends. And we're like, how funny would it be if we did this? There's no like membership or like, you don't have to be initiated. Like, we just go out and paint crosswalks. That's it. It's not, it's not that deep, I guess. So I guess I'm like the West LA chapter now, or, but it's not official. It's just like, hey guys, let's go out and do this. I got safety vests and paint and whatnot. So I learned how to make the crosswalks, and I organized a group of my friends. And basically what we were going to do was we were going to paint these crosswalks around Stoner Park at the start of the summer in time for summer camp, basically, because there's a lot of summer camps at the park. So we did it. Every Saturday morning for 4 weeks, we painted a different corner of the park. The park's a big square, so picked a different corner every week. And it took about 2 hours each time. We had 5 to 10 people show up. And we painted the crosswalks. The crosswalks were up for about 2 months at Stoner Park, the ones we painted. And then the story dropped in the West Side Current, which is the local paper. And they were pretty appreciative, I guess. They wrote an article kind of applauding the effort. I guess it went a little locally viral. Fox 11 and KTLA came out. The story got a bunch of traction. And the city sent out a crew pretty much immediately to remove the crosswalks, which was telling, right? I mean, that was kind of the point. We want to show that the city can act really fast when it comes to removing infrastructure, but they act extremely slowly when it comes to putting in infrastructure when that will save people's lives. In terms of making the decision to remove the crosswalks, there was no community outreach. There was no like consultant bidding process. There was no rounds of environmental review. They just did it. Right. And if they can act that fast to remove the crosswalks, they should be able to act that fast to make these basic common sense improvements to our city's parks and streets. So we were ready for that. The city removed the crosswalks, and then I put out a statement where I was basically like, this is ridiculous. And we had a call to action where people were emailing DOT, people were contacting our local city council person, Tracy Park. She had known about the crosswalks and that they were unsanctioned, and she'd asked to keep them in place. And we were able to put a lot of pressure on the mayor's office and the levers of local government. We started working at the start of May, so a couple of months ago. The story gets a lot of local media attention. At the end of July, the city removes the crosswalks. Then 6 days later, they call me to let me know that they're putting them back after the backlash. A crew comes out and they basically redo every corner of Stoner Park. They remove the stop line and the letters that say STOP, and they set them back so they could put in a big wide crosswalk at all 4 corners of the park, all to official specs. That same day, a 9-year-old boy named Nadir Gavarete was killed by an RV driver while riding a scooter in Koreatown at the intersection of 4th and New Hampshire. literally just a couple of hours after the mayor's office called to let me know that they were replacing the crosswalks. So I went out with the original Crosswalk Collective. It was a nice little reunion. But we went out to the corner of 4th and New Hampshire where this boy was killed, and we painted crosswalks at that intersection. Huh. Now, the frustrating thing about that situation was at this intersection, the corner of 4th and New Hampshire, 4th Street is a bikeway. It's one of the only accessible routes for bikes and scooters to get from Hoover Street, kind of like eastern end of Koreatown, all the way to the Grove in Mid-City. It's just a long, relatively quiet stretch of road that cyclists and people on scooters can use to get east and west when there aren't a lot of other options. Mm-hmm. And this one particular intersection, 4th and New Hampshire, has been a problem for over a decade. People were requesting changes to this intersection as far back as 2011, before this kid was even born. And the city has done absolutely nothing in more than 10 years. At one point, they installed a pop-up roundabout with hay bales and some basic signage in 2019 for a day. And the thing is, if there was a solid concrete roundabout, it was an RV driver, it was an intoxicated RV driver, it would have prevented this driver from making the left turn that caused them to hit this scooter and kill this boy. Narrower streets, roundabouts, traffic calming measures, speed bumps will prevent deaths like this. And the city has just neglected to address this problem for years. So anyways, on August 2nd, we put in this crosswalks at 4th and New Hampshire and Koreatown, while across town, the city is repainting the crosswalks at Stoner Park as a result of the backlash. We didn't get official approval for any of this. We just came out and did it. And, with the 4th and New Hampshire intersection, we worked with Nadir's family, and one of the crosswalks has a memorial for him with some pictures of fruit and such, because his father was a fruit vendor. And it was painted by members of the community in collaboration with his family. And I'm really excited about that. I think it looks beautiful, and the artist did a great job.
That's all we've got from that interview in episode 2534, but make sure to stay tuned for a new interview with Jonathan Hale coming soon. Thanks for listening to our 2025 highlights, and thank you so much for being a listener of Bike Talk. We'll be back next week with our regularly scheduled programming. Happy New Year, everyone, and ride safe.
And that was Bike Talk. If you have a story, a tip, or a topic, head over to biketalk.org and send us a message. Talk again next week.
Get your heart started, push on a pedal, push it down and up again. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, push your feet on the pedals, and ride it all around, ride it all around. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, push your feet on the pedals, and ride it all around, ride it all around.